The late afternoon sun blazed through the warped wooden slats of the old auction barn, casting long shafts of golden dust into the thick, stagnant air. The heat clung to the skin, and every breath tasted like dry hay and worn leather. A crowd of hardened ranchers leaned against the railings, silent and still beneath wide-brimmed hats. It was the Weatherford annual horse auction, and they were all waiting for the one horse that had everyone on edge, a dark, restless stallion named Rustler's Heart. He stepped into the ring with the slow power of a storm about to break. His coat gleamed like wet earth, muscles tight under his hide, his eyes sharp and untrusting. Even the handlers seemed nervous, gripping the lead rope like it might snap at any second. There was something about this horse, something untamed, something almost aware. And just as the murmurs began to rise in the stands, Sheriff Travis Renshaw barked a command that sliced through the air like a rifle shot. "Nobody move." His voice echoed in the timber bones of the barn. It wasn't just law, it was instinct. He didn't know why he said it. Not yet. But the moment the stallion's eyes met his, something inside him went cold. Rustler's heart froze mid-step, muscles quivering, head lifted, ears pinned back. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was loaded, like the air before lightning. Then the horse reared. The sound of hooves slamming into the dirt was thunderous. One of the ranch hands stumbled backward, nearly trampled. The others didn't move, couldn't. It wasn't just obedience to the sheriff's voice, it was fear. That horse wasn't acting out of panic. It was something else entirely. He wasn't afraid. He was focused. On Travis. And in that terrifying gaze, Travis saw something he hadn't felt in over 20 years. Guilt. Pure, unshakable guilt. Memories he'd buried clawed their way back up like roots through concrete. A broken fence, a storm rolling in, a voice shouting his name, and blood in the mud. "No," he whispered, throat dry, fists clenched. "That can't be him." But Rustler's Heart didn't look away. Instead, he stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Not like a horse, but like a ghost that had finally found the man who left the door open. Travis didn't blink. He couldn't. His boots felt rooted to the barn floor, as if the boards themselves had seized his legs and held him captive. Rustler's Heart stood there, breathing hard, chest heaving, steam curling from his nostrils in the hot Texas air. But those eyes, dark, intelligent, burning with something deeper than fear, held Travis in place like chains. In that moment, he wasn't a sheriff, not a pillar of the community. He was just a man, face to face with something he thought was long dead and gone. The crowd slowly regained its breath. A few whispers passed through the barn like brushfire. "That ain't normal," someone muttered near the back. Another voice asked, "You see the way that horse looked at the sheriff?" But Travis couldn't answer. He didn't even hear them. The heat, the light, the crowd, it all faded into a strange, echoing silence. All he could hear was the drumming of his own heart and the memory of a name he hadn't spoken in 2 decades. Blackjack. He hadn't said that name since the summer of '02, when a storm split the valley and his father, Buck Renshaw, forced him to make a decision he'd never forgive himself for. That horse had the same fire in his eyes. The same scar near the shoulder, barely visible under the dust and muscle, but Travis saw it. He saw it, and it hit him like a punch to the gut. But that couldn't be Blackjack. That horse was supposed to be dead. Gone. Buried with the past. Wasn't he? Sheriff. It was Riley Garrison, his young deputy, stepping cautiously beside him. "You okay?" Travis nodded once, too quickly, swallowing the storm rising in his chest. "Yeah," he lied. "Yeah, just, heat's getting to me." But Riley wasn't convinced. He kept looking between Travis and Rustler's Heart like trying to work out a puzzle no one had given him the pieces to. The crowd was watching too now, not the horse anymore, but Travis. And he felt every stare like a weight on his shoulders. Then came the voice that truly made his skin crawl. "Well, I'll be damned," drawled Emmett Rawlins, the old cowboy in the back who rarely spoke. He leaned on his carved cane, eyes narrowed under a dusty hat. "That ain't just any horse. That one's been here before. Long time ago." Travis turned sharply, his heart jumping. Emmett knew. Of course he did. The past had a way of clinging to men like Emmett, the kind who never forgot. And just like that, Travis realized this wasn't going away. Not this time. That night, Travis didn't go home. He couldn't. His truck sat idling outside the sheriff's office, the headlights throwing long shadows across the empty main street of Weatherford. The windows of Pearl Dugan's boarding house flickered with the dull blue light of late-night television, and the neon sign of the hitching post bar blinked lazily. But Travis stared at the steering wheel, still feeling the weight of Rustler's heart stare burning into the back of his mind. That scar, that look, that impossible familiarity. It was Blackjack, or what was left of him. He stepped out into the heavy night air, letting the silence settle around him like a blanket. Every creak of the old wooden porch beneath his boots sounded like a gunshot. He didn't want to go inside. Didn't want to see his own reflection in the glass. Because he knew what he'd see. Not a sheriff, not a man of order, but the same reckless boy who'd watched his father load a terrified colt into the back of a trailer and drive off into a storm, 23 years ago. Inside the office, Travis dropped his hat on the desk, rubbed his eyes, and opened the old filing cabinet that had been untouched for years. Second drawer. Bottom folder. He didn't have to look. His hand found it instinctively. June 2002, livestock incident. Property of Buck Renshaw. The report was short. Vague. Deliberately so. Horse injured. Animal sold off property. No further action taken. Travis had written it himself, under his father's orders. He was only 19, and scared to death of Buck. A knock on the door startled him. Sharp, firm. He froze. Then came the voice, rough and low. "You got a minute?" It was Emmett Rawlins. Travis opened the door and stepped aside. Emmett walked in slowly, tapping his cane against the floor. He didn't sit. Just stood there, watching Travis with eyes that had seen far too much. "That horse," he said, "ain't supposed to be here." Travis said nothing. Emmett nodded like he already knew. "Back in '02, I saw your daddy at the Cooper Ranch. He wasn't there to sell a horse. He was hiding one." The room seemed to shrink around them. Travis's throat tightened. "You saw him?" Emmett's eyes narrowed. "I saw Blackjack. And son, if that's the same horse out there, then something real bad got buried a long time ago. And it's clawing its way back." Charlene Slade stood outside the Weatherford Chronicle building, smoking a cigarette she told herself she'd quit a year ago. The smell of ink and stale coffee drifted from inside, mixing with the scent of asphalt still warm from the day's sun. She'd been covering the auction for a fluff piece. Local tradition draws big crowd. But that story went up in smoke the moment Rustler's heart reared up and locked eyes with Sheriff Travis Renshaw. That look. It wasn't just animal instinct. It was recognition. And it shook Travis to his core. Charlene saw it. She felt it. Back at her desk, she flipped through her notebook, then turned to the file cabinet behind her, the one with the dusty folders no one touched anymore. Local tragedies, old disputes, things the town liked to forget. She found what she was looking for in the R section. Renshaw, Buck, 2002 livestock transfer. Thin file. Oddly thin. Just a single page and a blurred black and white photo of a colt. Charlene's stomach turned. The horse's eyes were unmistakable. Meanwhile, Travis sat on the porch of the old Renshaw Ranch, a place that had once been filled with noise. His sister Darlene's laughter, his father's barking orders, the sound of hooves pounding across open fields. Now it was quiet. Dust settled on the windowsills. The barn door creaked even when there was no wind. He gripped an old whiskey bottle, untouched. He didn't drink anymore. Not since Buck died. Not since that night. But tonight, he needed to remember, even if it hurt. He closed his eyes, and the memory came fast, like a lightning strike. Rain slamming against the roof. Buck's voice shouting over the thunder. "He don't belong here, Travis. That horse is trouble." The colt, Blackjack, rearing in fear. Travis had tried to stop it. Tried to fight his father. But Buck was a force of nature back then, and Travis was just a kid with a soft heart and no spine. He'd watched them disappear into the dark, the trailer's red lights blinking like dying stars. Back at the Chronicle, Charlene printed out the photo of Blackjack and held it side by side with the image she'd taken of Rustler's heart at the auction. Same scar. Same eyes. Same horse. She didn't want to believe it, but the truth was staring at her. She grabbed her keys. "Time to stir the dust," she muttered. Across town, Travis finally stood, the bottle still sealed in his hand. He knew he couldn't outrun the past anymore. Because now, the past was looking him dead in the eye. Travis returned to the barn where Rustler's heart was being held, his badge tucked in his pocket and his hand trembling just enough to betray the calm he wore like armor. The place was dim, lit only by a swaying overhead bulb that buzzed like a hornet. The horse stood motionless in his stall, head low, eyes watching. Waiting. Travis approached slowly, boots crunching over loose hay. As he got closer, Rustler's heart lifted his head, and again, that unrelenting stare pierced through him. It was Blackjack. He didn't need a test. He didn't need proof. He knew it in his bones. "You remember me," Travis muttered under his breath, the words dry and cracked. "God help me, you remember." He reached out with shaking fingers, but the stallion stepped back, muscles coiling. Travis froze. It wasn't just recognition. It was resentment. This wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning. The horse hadn't just come back. He had come back for something. And deep down, Travis feared what that something might be. Miles away, Charlene's truck kicked up dust as she sped down the dirt road toward the old Cooper ranch, now long abandoned and covered in weeds. According to Emmett Rawlins, Buck Renshaw had taken the horse there 23 years ago, not to sell him, but to hide him. Charlene pulled up to the rusted gate, flashlight in hand, and stepped into the silence of the forgotten property. The barn creaked. The air smelled like mildew and old secrets. Her boots sank slightly in the dirt floor as she pushed open the door. Inside, the past waited like a loaded trap. Rusted tack hung on nails. A half-broken halter lay discarded in the corner. And there, behind a pile of rotted hay, she saw it, an old feed barrel, partially buried. She pried off the lid and recoiled. Inside were scraps of blood-stained cloth, and something else. A small, warped leather tag, the kind used to brand ownership. Faded, but still readable, property of Buck Renshaw. Her stomach turned. Back at the barn, Travis sat in the straw outside Rustler's Heart stall, his back against the wall, eyes closed. He remembered his father's voice that night. "You don't protect a mistake, son. You bury it." Travis had spent half his life living by that line, wearing a badge and pretending it meant something. But the horse knew better. The horse remembered everything he tried to forget. Charlene, clutching the leather tag, whispered to herself, "What the hell did you do, Buck?" And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted the answer. Because whatever happened that night, it wasn't over. The next morning brought no relief. The sky hung low and gray, like it was pressing down on the whole town. Travis stood at his father's old workbench in the barn, turning over a rusted horseshoe in his hand. Everything smelled like memory, sweat, wood, and something else, something bitter. He looked over at Rustler's Heart, who stood perfectly still in the stall, as if carved from stone. That same unreadable expression. That same silence that said more than words ever could. The horse wasn't just watching, He was waiting for Travis to stop lying to himself. And Travis finally did. He pulled down an old box from the top shelf, the one with the Renshaw family brand burned into the lid. Inside were papers Buck had kept hidden, deeds, receipts, medical reports. And there it was, a vet invoice dated July 2002. The name on it? Dr. Earl Haggerty. Travis felt like the floor dropped beneath him. The report listed a severe wound to left shoulder, likely caused by a sharp object. Animal sedated. Owner declined surgery. Requested immediate disposal. Travis closed his eyes. Disposal meant Rustler's heart was never supposed to survive. Across town, Charlene sat at her kitchen table, the leather tag on the counter next to a steaming cup of black coffee. She'd barely slept. The look in Travis's eyes at the auction haunted her. She'd loved him once. Part of her probably still did. But this wasn't about romance. This was about truth. And in Weatherford, truth had a habit of being buried under names like Renshaw and Slade. She picked up her phone and dialed Travis. He didn't answer. At the barn, Travis sat on a bale of hay, head in his hands. Darlene stepped in quietly, her face lined with concern. "I saw the reports, Travis," she said gently. "I knew Daddy hurt that horse. But I didn't know he made you part of it." Travis didn't look up. "I didn't stop him, Dar. I was a coward. I let him take that colt out in the storm. I thought he killed him." Darlene sat beside him, voice steady. "Maybe he tried. But that horse, he survived. And now he's back for a reason." Just then, the barn doors creaked open. Charlene stepped inside, holding the leather tag. Her eyes moved from Travis to Rustler's heart, and for a moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavy with the truth they all shared. "He remembers," she said softly. "And now, so do you." For a long moment, no one inside the barn moved. Charlene stood near the open doors, holding the worn leather tag between her fingers like it might bite. Darlene sat beside her brother on the hay bale, her expression unreadable. And Travis, he couldn't look at either of them. His eyes stayed locked on the stall, where Rustler's heart stood in silence, his gaze unwavering. The tension in the air was thick, the kind of stillness that comes right before something breaks. Charlene finally stepped forward. "I found this at the old Cooper place," she said, voice low, extending the tag to Travis. "Your father didn't just hurt that horse. He covered it up. And you were part of it, whether you meant to be or not." Her words weren't cruel, just honest. Honest in the way only someone who'd once loved him could be. Travis took the tag in his hands, his fingers trembling. He stared at the name. Property of Buck Renshaw. That one sentence felt like a chain around his chest. "I didn't know he survived," Travis whispered. "I thought he was gone. That night, I just did what he told me. I never questioned it." Darlene's hand found his shoulder. "We were raised not to question him. But that doesn't mean we get to pretend we didn't see." Charlene walked over to the stall. The horse watched her but didn't move. Slowly, she held out her hand, palm open. Rustler's heart lowered his head slightly, sniffing. A quiet moment passed between them, something ancient and pure, trust. "This horse," she said softly, "remembers everything. And yet he's still here." She turned to Travis. "Can you say the same?" Travis stood, his voice rough. "I want to make it right. But I don't know how. There's no fixing the past." Charlene looked him dead in the eye. "No, but you can stop carrying it like a badge. You can tell the truth. Let people know what happened. Let this town know who Buck Renshaw really was." Darlene nodded. "It's time, Travis." He looked again at Rustler's heart, who blinked slowly, calm now as if waiting. Not for revenge. For release. And Travis understood. The truth wasn't just about clearing his conscience. It was about freeing them all, including the one who had no voice but never forgot. The next morning, the town of Weatherford woke to something it hadn't seen in years. Sheriff Travis Renshaw standing in front of the courthouse steps, not as a symbol of order, but as a man with a burden too heavy to carry alone. The sky was overcast, the air humid and still, like the town itself was holding its breath. A small crowd had gathered, townsfolk, ranchers, and a few reporters. Among them stood Charlene, arms crossed, and Darlene, silent but resolute. Travis stepped up to the microphone, the courthouse wall towering behind him like the weight of his family name. "I need to tell you all something," Travis began, his voice gravelly but steady. "Back in 2002, a horse named Blackjack was injured on Renshaw land. He belonged to my father. And instead of helping him, my father tried to dispose of him, to bury the evidence of what he'd done. I helped cover it up. I was young, scared, and loyal to the wrong man. But that doesn't excuse what happened." A murmur spread through the crowd. Faces turned. Some in disbelief, some in quiet understanding. The Renshaw name had carried weight in this town for generations, the kind of name that closed doors and silenced questions. And now, Travis was pulling that name into the light. "That horse survived," he continued. "He came back. You all saw him at the auction. You saw what he carries in his eyes. His name now is Rustler's Heart, and he remembers what I tried to forget." Inside the barn, away from the crowd, Rustler's Heart stood calmly as the vet, Dr. Earl Haggerty, checked his vitals. Earl said nothing, but his hands moved gently, almost reverently. He had treated the horse once under orders to stay quiet. Now, his silence came from respect. "You're a tough old thing," he muttered to the horse. "And maybe you're the only reason that boy's finally telling the truth." Back on the courthouse steps, Travis looked out at the townspeople. "This isn't just about a horse. It's about the kind of men we let define us. My father was respected, feared, but he hurt things he didn't understand. I won't live in that shadow anymore. And I won't let this town pretend it didn't look the other way." He stepped back from the mic, not needing applause. There was none. Just silence, the heavy kind that comes after something honest. Charlene met his eyes across the square and gave a small, steady nod. Sometimes, truth doesn't make a sound. It just stands tall and waits to be heard. The days after Travis's confession passed slowly, like the town itself didn't quite know how to react. Some folks avoided eye contact when he passed by. Others nodded silently, like they finally saw the man behind the badge. But one thing was certain. Something had shifted. The weight that had hovered over Weatherford for decades had begun to lift, not because the truth was easy, but because it was finally spoken out loud. Travis spent most of his time at the barn now. Not out of guilt, but out of something closer to devotion. Rustler's Heart, or Blackjack as he'd once known him, had begun to let him near. Not fully. Not yet. But the stallion no longer pulled away when Travis entered the stall. Their eyes still met in silence, but that silence had changed. It wasn't filled with pain now. It was filled with possibility. With time. One afternoon, Travis pulled out an old saddle from storage, the same one Buck had used back when the Renshaws were known for their horses, not their secrets. He dusted it off, adjusted the straps, and brought it into the stall. Rustler's Heart eyed it cautiously but didn't bolt. Travis didn't try to saddle him right away. He just let the leather sit there in the straw, a quiet offering. "I won't force you," he said gently. Not like he did. Meanwhile, Charlene was putting together a story. Not the sensational kind, but something honest. "A Sheriff's Reckoning," the headline read. She'd written and rewritten the ending 5 times, never quite satisfied. until she realized it wasn't her ending to write. She left the last paragraph blank and waited. That evening, she stopped by the barn. Travis was brushing Rustler's Heart's coat with slow, even strokes. The animal stood calm, eyes half closed. "He trusts you now," she said softly. "I don't know if he trusts me," Travis replied, "but he's giving me the chance to earn it." He looked at Charlene, his voice lower. "Same goes for a lot of people, I guess." She didn't respond right away, just watched the man she once loved, the man she might still love, doing the work most folks ran from. Quiet work. Honest work. As the sun dipped low behind the hills, a warm orange glow filled the barn. Travis looked at the saddle, then at Rustler's Heart. The horse stepped closer, not out of fear, but choice. Travis reached for the reins, slowly, carefully. And this time, the horse didn't back away. It was early morning when Travis rode Rustler's Heart down the dirt road behind the old Renshaw ranch. Mist clung to the fields like a memory not yet ready to lift. The saddle creaked gently beneath him, and the rhythm of the horse's steps was steady, not forced, not fearful, just real. For the first time in over 20 years, horse and rider moved together, no secrets between them. What once was buried had finally been unearthed, not to destroy, but to heal. He rode past the broken fence where Blackjack, Rustler's Heart, had once bolted in terror. Travis slowed the horse and stopped. He dismounted and stood there, hand resting on the animal's shoulder. The grass had grown over the damage, but the scar in the land still showed if you knew where to look, just like the scars people carried. He knelt, pressed a hand to the earth, and whispered something only the wind and the horse could hear. Back in town, Charlene watched from her office window as the townspeople read her printed article, now published in full. A sheriff's reckoning. Weatherford's quiet redemption. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't need to. The story spoke for itself. Truth, once denied, now laid bare. People talked. Not all kindly, but with a new kind of respect. Because it takes strength to hide pain, but it takes something greater to own it in front of everyone. Later that afternoon, Darlene joined Travis by the ranch house porch. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun stretch across the pasture. "You think he forgives you?" she asked quietly. Travis didn't answer right away. He looked toward the barn, where Rustler's Heart stood grazing, calm as ever. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe he doesn't need to. Maybe just letting me ride him. That's enough." Darlene nodded. "You're not your father, Travis. You never were." He looked at her, and for the first time in years, smiled. Not out of joy, but out of peace. The kind of peace that comes only after the storm. As the day ended, Travis led Rustler's Heart out one last time. Not for training. Not for display. Just to ride, side by side with the past. Not dragged by it, not running from it. And as the wind picked up through the fields and the sky opened wide over Texas, there was no guilt in his steps. Only grace.